When Diocletian was emperor, he revamped the political structure of the empire. He retained supreme authority, though he shared the title of Augustus with Maximian. Galerius and Constantinus were Caesars under Diocletian and Maximian. Diocletian wanted an orderly succession. This was not to be the case, as Galerius tried to take over. In 304, Diocletian became ill, and Galerius forced him to abdicate. Then, Galerius threatened Maximian with war. Maximian abdicated. Galerius and Constantinus became co-Augustuses. Severus and Maximian Daia became Caesars under Galerius and Constantinus. However, they were puppets under the control of Galerius. However, Constantinus and his son Constantine held the loyalty of more of the army than Galerius did. But Galerius had Constantine held at his court as a hostage to blackmail Constantinus. However, Constantine would escape and join his father. Soon, Maximentius, son of Maximian, the old Augustus under Diocletian, went to Rome and rallied an army and took over the territory that Severus ruled. This, along with defections from the army and Constantine escaping to Constantinus, Galerius was losing control, so he applied to Diocletian, who negotiated a truce between the parties. Part of the truce was to have a new Augustus appointed. His name was Licinius. In 311, Galerius would die, 5 days after having rescinded the order for the persecution of the church. Licinius would take control of Galerius's territory. By 312, Constantine had taken over from his father Constantinus, who had died. Constantine then invaded Maximentius's territory and marched on Rome. Maximentius gathered his troops and fought Constantine at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, where Maximentius died. Two different Christian historians say that Constantine had a revelation on the eve of the battle. He was to have his army use a Christian symbol on their shields and banners. Chi and Rho were the first two letters in the name Christ, and these letters was what he put on his army's shields and banners. After the battle, Constantine and Licinius met in Milan and formed an alliance. While they were there, Maximian Daia invaded Licinius's territory and took the city of Byzantium. Licinius arrived to fight Maximian with a smaller army, but he won. Maximian fled and died shortly afterwards. Licinius then managed to gain control of Maximian's territory. Thus, the empire was divided between Licinius and Constantine. Both men wanted to be the lone ruler of the empire. There was an assassination attempt on Constantine, and it was traced to a relative of Licinius. Licinius refused to give the relative over to Constantine. This caused war to break out, and Licinius was in his Eastern European landholdings. Constantine maneuvered his way around and took the city of Byzantium. Licinius was cut off from most of his support and sued for peace. The truce would last from 314 to 322. There was continuing contention between the two. Licinius never claimed to be a Christian and had to put down several disturbances in which Christians were involved. This gave rise to the idea that Constantine was the defender of Christians. In 322, war broke out again. Constantine's smaller army won and Licinius retreated to Byzantium, then into Asia Minor, and suffered more defeats. Constance, Licinius's wife and the half-sister of Constantine, persuaded Constantine to agree to Licinius's abdication if his life was spared. With the abdication of Licinius, Constantine had control of the entire empire. He would rule until his death in 337. He moved the capital from Rome to Byzantium and renamed it Constantinople. Then he began to expand the city. Statues, relics, and columns were brought from all over the empire to embellish the city. The old gods were new ornaments. Not very long after Constantine, the western half of the empire was overrun, including Rome. Constantinople would preserve the empire's culture and old religious heritage for 1,000 years. Because this capital city's original name was Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire would also become known as the Byzantine Empire. Questions abound about Constantine's conversion to Christianity. Some say it was solely a political move, others that it was genuine. The normal course for new believers was that they would be discipled under the bishop, so they would understand what the faith was about. Constantine never did this, not until his deathbed. He considered himself Bishop of Bishops and claimed the title of High Priest in the pagan religion. The Latin term for this was Pontificus Maximus. Though at the end he did receive baptism, it would come from one who was widely considered a heretic. Constantine's religious practices cast many doubts as to whether his faith was genuine. Yet some evidence can be found in his supporting Christianity when he did. He stood to gain little help in his war from Christians. Whether or not Constantine was a genuine believer, he had a large impact on the church, and we still feel his impact today. One thing that happened was that Christian churches were not taxed. Previously, it had only been pagan temples that enjoyed this status. Persecution ceased. Worship on Sundays started to change. People started flocking to Christian churches. A few embraced the new merger of church and state. Others considered it apostasy and went to live in the deserts. This was the monastic reaction, which would lead to the founding of many monasteries, as well as a group known collectively as the Desert Fathers. The church, as a whole, faced a host of opportunities and challenges with the new situation. Worship services were where most common Christians really felt the impact of the emperor. Where before worship had been simple, the new situation was making things more ornate. Services went from homes and graveyards to new buildings. The style of these buildings had been used before, mostly by private wealthy citizens, though there were some public ones. These buildings were called basilicas. Constantine and his mum had several churches built in this style, and many followed their lead. In these new churches, a special chair for the bishop was in the sanctuary and was called the cathedra. Incense, which was used as a sign of respect to the emperor, made its appearance. Ministers began wearing better clothes for Sunday instead of the regular ones they were accustomed to wearing. Hand gestures, which were also a sign of respect to the emperor, also made their way into church. Also, a processional with an accompanying choir was started to be used. Again, this was something from the Roman emperor had made its way into the church. Despite all these changes, the core of Christian worship was still the same. Communion was still the central act of worship, and the church as a whole retained the central aspects of Christianity. The question was, how much adaptation should there be in the church?